How psychopaths work is by sowing confusion and befuddlement upon their prey. Something that Thomas Sheridan talks about is who you're going to call. Now, that is the phenomenon whereby a psychopath will openly abuse their victim and then smirk at them and say, well, look what I've just done, what you're going to do about it. We're witnessing that now writ large in the US, but we witnessed it in 2020 in Ireland. In both instances, we had general elections, which ended up with the result that I think a lot of people didn't want. This is deliberate. So, for example, if you look at Joe Biden is not competent to hold office anymore. Not that he ever particularly was, but if you examine Biden, he's gone senile, and he was never a nice person. He was always a creepy, great guy type psychopath. But beneath that great guy image that Biden cultivated was a nasty individual, an angry individual who would retort in a very unpleasant way to people who challenged him. But that is a psychopathic role that he has adopted for himself, the great guy. Under no circumstances is Biden suitable to take on the US presidency. But the people who are behind this don't care. I'd go further, I'd say that it's deliberate, because to the extent that these monsters are actually able to think in the long term, and they aren't, they are happy to send out the message to voters that their vote doesn't count. That's what happened in Ireland in 2020. People did not want Fine Gael back in. People did not want Fianna Fáil back in, so as a result they got both. It's hard to know what to think of Micheál Martin, the Irish Taoiseach. He's an asterisk Taoiseach in much the same way that Biden is going to be an asterisk president. Biden is now, I think, about 77, or he'll be the oldest person to assume the role of president. The idea that he won the largest electoral college vote and the largest popular vote in US history is frankly ridiculous. It is ridiculous literally and in every broad sense of the word. It is open to ridicule that a whopping majority of American citizens would vote for somebody like that. That does not stand credibility. It doesn't stand credibility when one compares it to when one contrasts the rallies of Biden to the rallies of Trump in the campaign of 2020. It doesn't matter. They don't care. They've got their man in. It's constitutional. It is legal. It is lawful, and they don't care. Let's say tonight Biden drops dead. It doesn't matter. Kamala Harris will take over the presidency. As of the vote of yesterday, that means that has ended. That's significant as much from a Donald Trump point of view as a Biden point of view. Trump is not going to get the presidency now. But it's okay. It's all right. Donald Trump has 2 weeks left in the presidency. This is going to turn interesting because there's a credible prospect of an effort being made to remove him from the presidency for those final 2 weeks. If they do that, that'll prove that he knew stuff. I'm surprised. I thought he had enough dirt on them to be able to blackmail his way into getting Congress to vote him through. Obviously, either he does and they're just defying him, or he doesn't. Perhaps I was naive. I thought Congress would do the good thing and say, well, there's so much doubt around both the popular vote and electoral college vote that the better thing to do is to let the incumbent stay in and do another 4 years. This proves that they don't care. There are very important lessons coming out of all of these things, both the Irish general election of 2020 and this presidential election in the United States. That the gloves are now coming off with these monsters who are in control, and that they're less inclined to even try and put a veneer of credibility on what they're doing. They genuinely don't care. But that is that when a relationship is abusive, it does start with grooming, and then it starts with then it continues into other forms of abuse, and we're moving beyond that now to it becoming openly abusive. A lot of people are wondering how this is going to turn out, I want to be clear about the fact from where I'm viewing Donald Trump's now finished as president, because that's a final vote. The decision of Congress is final. It can't be overturned in the Supreme Court. In that instance, Congress is over the court in that regard. Similar to Ireland, the United States Supreme Court is not going to interfere in the separate constitutional powers of the legislature. So that's it. People need to take a look at the congressmen who backed down and who said they'd back up Trump and that they didn't, like Lindsey Graham. Never trust a man with a woman's name. Just look at the state of Graham. Look at him, for goodness sake. Could they ultimately have pulled it off, that Congress would have overturned the election and exercised its right to do that and kept Donald Trump in as president? Now, let's be clear, Congress has a right to do that. Yesterday, Congress could have voted to keep Donald Trump in the presidency, and it would not have been open to any challenge. They chose not to. And they had a free vote in that regard. Don't imagine that they were bound by anything. It's like the British Parliament or the Irish Parliament. When they're in session, they are completely sovereign in their own right, and nobody shall interfere with their right to make their own decision. So if Congress has a constitutional right to choose the US president, then they had the right yesterday to choose Trump, and they decided not to. So that's, it's deliberate. It's not just something that happened where they said, oh, well, that's the way it is. That wasn't what happened. Congress had the right to overturn the election vote. And, the election vote itself is so questionable, so open to challenge. But it's over now. I think that this will continue to be studied. People will continue to look at the fraud that happened. People will continue to look at the huge disparities in the result that came through. But it is, in terms of Donald Trump getting back into the presidency this time, it's not going to happen. Will he run again in 2024? Who knows? I think he shouldn't. I think he should let go at this time now, and he should rightfully take his place as king of the red pill, black glasses brigade. We would happily anoint him into that role tomorrow if he wishes to do it. I hope he does. He'd be great. Don't imagine that he's going to back down. Caitlyn Jenner was asked last year, and I'm a Celebrity, get me out of here, what's Donald Trump like? And the reply was, he never gives up. He never stops. That's true, and it is a terrible pity that a person of that character didn't get to do another 4 years. But he got 4 years. How many people end up getting 4 years as US president, for goodness sake? There's no shame attached to not getting a second term, particularly in the circumstances that we're witnessing. This is a psychopathic thing that we're going through. We're looking here in Ireland at Leo Varadkar, who has admitted openly to having committed 2 acts of criminal corruption in relation to interference in public selection processes. Nothing is happening to him yet. Another thing that the psychopaths want people to rely on is a sense of despair and that there's nothing that you can do. That's rubbish. Captain Austin Fitz says, when you stop fearing them, you've already won. Today, a woman rang me on my mobile to speak to my mother. She was a friend of my mum's, a kind of acquaintance of mum's, who they played cards with at an organised card school, which had to end because of the lockdown. And we were talking about masks, and we were talking about the whole thing. And, she said, if people could just show a bit more consideration and stick within the guidelines. Well, I said, why should they? I said, if the guidelines, they can't be enforced. Well, people are just being selfish. Well, I said, they wouldn't see it that way. I said, and by the way, I'm a complete anti-masker. I haven't worn a mask. I don't socially distance. Neither do my parents. Well, she said, you should be thinking of others. Why should I? I said, they don't think of me. And I was anxious not to be too abrasive to this woman, because she was ringing up to offer some friendship to my mum and to keep her chatting on the phone, that kind of thing. But at the same time, it was like listening to RTE. It was just like listening to this spiel from RTE. I said, by the way, I said to her, in relation to breaking the law, what about those 5 RTE newsreaders with their colleague? Oh, well, she said, people are making too much of this. No, I said, I don't think they are. I said, because if you take myself, I said, since February of 2020, I've been saying to people that this whole thing is a scam. And, okay, if they're vulnerable or weak or liable to becoming sick, then they should take precautions. I said, but the notion of closing down our economy, restricting people's travel in the country, intruding upon people's privacy, I said, that's not necessary for the situation that we're in. I said, but I have always said that. I've said it consistently and I've refused to wear a mask. Eileen Dunn, for example, David McCullough, who has me blocked on Twitter, all of those ones in RTE have been peddling fear porn unendingly since March of 2020, and then they're caught out at a party for a colleague, breaking all the rules. I said, they are the ones who are the hypocrites, but not only are they the hypocrites, but they are, to the extent of them being folk on TV, they are public figures. Oh, well, she said, you're just coming out with stuff that I'm not able to answer. Well, I said, would you like to take a moment to consider an answer that you would like to stand over? I said, I'm not rushing you here. I said, but a moment ago I pointed you to these hypocrites, these public hypocrites, who broke the law and have faced no sanction for it. At least Kay Burley and Sky got suspended for 6 months. You know, okay, I think the whole thing is a hoax, but at least Sky is talking the talk where they've walking the walk where they've talked the talk. These RTE stars, you know, are hypocrites and they're liars, and that now, according to the criminal code pertaining to COVID-19, they're also criminals. And you're defending them, I said. She said, I'm not defending them. Well, I said, a moment ago you said that I shouldn't be criticising them. So you are defending them. You know? And this poor woman, and as I went on with her, you know, this poor woman was like listening to RTE. And I said this to her. I said, whatever about any panic that arose in February or March or April of 2020, we're not seeing people dropping like flies in the streets. We're not seeing piles of corpses that we were told would happen. I said, so this is not as serious, even by their own criteria, as they made it out to be. Now, I said to her, if you still think that those provisions, including wearing a mask, which was only brought in August anyway, if you think all of these terribly restrictive provisions are still applicable and still are needed, then, and I quoted Jamie Fletcher, Jamie the Archer is his YouTube channel, I said, then you are part of a cult, because you are not relying on the facts that are in front of your eyes. You are relying on a personal and subjective devotion to other people who you think should be listened to irrationally. You know, I said everything has to be treated skeptically. Trump has to be treated skeptically, but he doesn't mind that. Trump, you know, was not an authoritarian. He was quite happy that people should challenge and question him. You know, it's the likes of the Democrats who are authoritarian. And then she says, well, I hope Trump leaves office gracefully and graciously. I said, why should he? I said, he's going to be leaving office. He ceases to be president on the 20th or 21st, I'm not sure the precise date, of January. I said, that's it. You know, if he's still in the White House, they'll remove him. They would be entitled to come in and arrest him if he's still in the White House. But he won't be. He's not going to do that. But I said, do you think he's going to go to the inauguration and clap Joe Biden? I think that that's quite unlikely. And why should he? Why should he? He doesn't know Joe Biden anything. Oh, well, she said, you know how rude he is. No, I said, I don't know how rude he is. Look at Joe Biden. Look at the things he said to children in their ears, and look at sniffing men's wives' hair. You know, his behaviour is objectively inappropriate. This is not a fit person to be in office. Neither is Trump, she said. I said, why? Can't answer. That is, as Jamie Fletcher said, the behaviour of a person who's in a cult. She considers herself to be polite. She considers herself to be educated. She considers herself to be one of the intelligent ones, but she's totally drunk the Kool-Aid. I told her that these lockdowns, and also not just the lockdown in relation to homes and closure of businesses, but the restriction of a person's right to travel around the country, I said that is unprecedented. We've never done that in this country before. We didn't even do it in the UK days before 1922, when, you know, with the famine and all of these kind of things. No, they didn't do that. But now, apparently, we're not allowed to travel 5 kilometres. I said, and that's class-based. Because I said, my parents own a property down the country. I said, we have people who come down and check up on it, but we reserve the right to visit our property. Not when the Gardaí tell us, not when the men in RTE tell us, not when Simon Harris decides, when we decide. Because that's our property and we're living in a free society. Now, in the first lockdown, they had restricted people's rights to visit holiday homes and second properties, this kind of thing. I noticed that they didn't do that this time. So they created essential visits and reasonable excuses, and they're, again, like the mask thing, extremely broad, and that is because, in my opinion, somebody threatened the state with litigation. That could only be, I know how the state works. I know how they work at Attorney General level. That sounds boastful, but actually I do. And somebody must have threatened them at that and said, no, hold on. If I want to visit my home in Donegal or West Clare or wherever, and I live in Dublin, then I am entitled to have access to my property. So this is why, with this lockdown, despite how draconian RTE is making it out to be, in fact, they have put in provisions for people to travel. I wrote to the local Garda superintendent by a letter, and I said, my parents own a property in the country. We reserve the right for me, on behalf of my parents, to go down and check up on that property. I got a phone call from the Gardaí, from the superintendent's office, saying, thank you for the letter, print out a few copies, have it in the car, be ready to show it in case you're stopped. But we're happy with that. We're happy to let you do that. So what I said to the woman today was, this is class-based, because not everybody owns second, or in the case of my parents, third and fourth properties. Not everybody has that. So those people who only are living in an apartment somewhere or in a semi-detached house somewhere, they don't even have this ruse. Well, I'm not using that term. It's not a ruse. I don't believe there's anything ruse-worthy about going to visit our property. We've a right to do that. An inalienable and unfettered right to do that. The woman says, we have a holiday home in County Wexford, and I'm not going to come up with a half-baked excuse like that. Good, I said, because my excuse isn't half-baked either. No more, I said, than my position in relation to not wearing a mask. I said, when I go into a supermarket, my local supermarket, I'm not wearing a mask. I notified the manager of that. I got permission to do that. I'm not breaking the law. And I told her about the man who called the guards on me. Oh, she said, that was a bit extreme, wasn't it? Do you think so? I said. Do you? I said, at least he walked the walk having talked the talk. I said, mind you, he ended up landing, flat in his face because, the staff all said that I had permission not to wear a mask, and the guard, he took him off the premises. But at the same time, he did go the whole hog and called the guards on me. I think he got cautioned for wasting their time. Most certainly should have. But he was too stupid to understand the fact that I was not breaking the law because I had permission of the shop. I'm not going to apologise for what I do. I'm not doing anything unlawful or illegal or unethical. I'm not being selfish. If people don't, she said, but you're being very selfish. I said, people are entitled to socially distance if they want to. I said, I'm not forcing myself upon people. I think a lot of people will probably thank me for that, but I'm not forcing myself upon people, I said to her. But she said, of course, it's not practical for people to socially distance when they're in the supermarket. Well, really, I said, I think you've just answered the whole thing for me there, haven't you? Psychopaths depend on confusion. That woman is confused. I could hear the NPC software break down there. But it was like listening to a distillation of RTE in the Irish Times. What are we going to do? Well, I said something. I analysed something in February of 2020. First of all, I said I'm never running for public office. Ever am I going to run for public office. Maybe Trump should have said that as well. But he's learned that lesson somewhat later than I did. But the second thing that I said was, the fact that I'm not running for public office doesn't mean that I'm succumbing to despair, or that, I'm in any way giving into the game of the psychopaths. It's just that I'm changing my tactics. What I said instead was, rather than running for public office, I'm going to be focusing on what is getting at the cheese brains like that woman, and that's the mainstream media. This is what I've been focused on since February, for the last 11 months. Before all the COVID-19 hoax broke out, actually, what motivated me to do that wasn't in any way related to COVID-19, because this time last year, if you'd have told me that what happened over the past 11 months would happen, I would have gone, oh, get out of here. I would not have believed it, but it has happened. But not only has it happened, but how many people have been acquiescent in this? You want to build a tyranny, you do it incrementally. You build it brick by brick. Don't forget, we were told 3 weeks to flatten the curve. Well, and now the lockdown is going to last to the end of spring. Well, that's cool. That's cool. And I said to the woman, we're hearing about level 5 and level 2 and level 3. I said, I want to know when we're going to be getting back to level 0. That's the question you need to ask people, by the way. All of these apologists for all of this, say to them, that's great. When are we getting back to level 0? You know, the way things were. Oh, she said, it'll be for a very, 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 it won't be for a very, very long time, she said. And until everybody has been vaccinated. So in other words, I said, you mean we're never going to get back to level 0? Because it seems that concomitant to that is that everybody should be vaccinated. And she said, why would you object to being vaccinated? I said, because I'm now 47 and I don't think there's really the strong need for me to get anything else at this stage. But moreover, because it is my right. Oh, don't tell me you're one of those anti-vaxxers. No, I said, I'm not telling you anything about vaccinations. I'm telling you about my rights. That's what I'm telling you about. My right not to wear a mask. My right to travel in my own country of which I'm a citizen. My right to privacy. My right to a presumption of innocence, my right to bodily integrity, including my right to choose not to have medical intervention, including by way of a face covering or by way of an injection. Those are my rights. And they're not negotiable to you, I said to her. And I don't feel the need to apologise for standing over my rights. Anybody who wants to take them from me should be more inclined to apologise for so doing. But we are where we are, and Trump lost the election and Biden's going to take over and all of this. And it's okay. It's okay. It's all right. I mean, I think had I been given a choice, well, who would you like to choose to take over here? Would it be Biden or would it be Trump? Who would have been Trump? But it's okay. Because, you know, Americans are, it's a free society, America is, whatever the mainstream media like to tell us. Another thing the mainstream media doesn't tell us, and Stixie said this, he had a live feed in which he was going bananas over all of this, and Stixie said, people forget the level of sovereign power that's still in the states, and how individual states, without seceding, there's not going to be any secession, the Civil War settled that, but individual states can turn around and say, no, you know, we're not following this agenda. The states are very, very independent of one another, and a lot of the states are fiercely proprietorial over their sovereignty in contrast to DC. It's not dissimilar to the European Union, where there are countries that are very anxious to keep themselves sovereign from the European Union, like Poland and Hungary. They're not planning to leave the European Union, but they're setting their own agenda. On the other hand, at the other end of the spectrum, you have countries which are completely compliant to every whim the European Union comes out with, like the Republic of Ireland. I do not believe that the political agenda being taken by our politicians in relation to the European Union and globalism is universally reflective of the people. But what we're seeing now is that the desires of the people of this country are increasingly or decreasingly troubling those who are making the decisions. So, for example, a law was passed recently which effectively overturned a referendum of 2004 in which we, the people, said we wanted to begin restricting citizenship rights. Then Helen McEntee, and I mean Helen McEntee couldn't clean toilets with a toothbrush, Helen McEntee announces that 17,000 illegals in this country are going to be allowed to stay. Then we have the shooting of George, what's his name, in Blanchardstown. And then we have all of these blacks suddenly getting up and telling us how racist we are. Where did this come from? How did this arise? I don't remember a crowd of Africans in this country telling me we were racist until about last week. You know, this is one of the whitest, indigenously one of the whitest countries in Europe. How has this arisen? How did these bullies come in here to insult and threaten us? You know, this isn't a racist country. We've been taking immigrants for a very, very long time. realistically, since the end of the 1940s, we've been, people have been coming into this country. We have a huge Chinese population. We've a huge Polish population. We've got large population groups in this country who are not ethnically Irish, and it's okay. That's all right. Then suddenly we have all these black people turning around telling us all that we're racist. Well, if they don't like it here, they can leave. Particularly, and it's interesting that George Inchenko, I think his name is, after he was shot dead by the guard, there was an objection raised by the Nigerian embassy. Well, that's very interesting. So he's not really a refugee because his home country is willing to make a consular petition on his behalf. How is he in here? If Nigeria is willing to stand up for his rights posthumously, then really I couldn't say that he or his family could ever be held to have had what could be called refugee status at all. So these are confusing times. Know it. Know how the psychopaths are working. They're trying to confuse you. Then know your own limits. It's kind of like these people who put tweets up saying, absolutely devastated at Trump losing, this will not be tolerated. Well, hold on a second. You're one guy on Twitter. No one cares. No one cares what I say. I'm one guy here on YouTube. But what you do is you focus on the one thing that you think you might have a slight degree of influence in. For me, it's the media. I don't care about the politicians anymore. I don't care about the US anymore. What we here on the alternative media scene need to keep doing is just to keep speaking out. That's good enough. That's more than good enough. We are in, and this may sound tinfoil hat of me to say it like this, but it is the truth. We are in World War III. What I mean by that is, if you look at World War I, the Great War, then you look at World War II, they were very different types of conflicts. The Great War was the end, really, of the high aristocratic imperial system. It's very interesting to see how the British royal family changed their name to Windsor from a Germanic Prussian name, Saxe Coburg Gotha, I think it was, off the top of my head. I might have it in the wrong order there. Another thing that the British royal family did, okay, we know that they changed their name to Windsor, but something that they get less attention for is that they distanced themselves very clearly and sharply from the lower tiers of the aristocracy because they saw what had happened to the Romanovs. The British royal family are extremely flexible and adaptable, and they will do whatever it takes to retain their position. If that means that the Queen disowns all her children, she'll do it tomorrow. Don't doubt me on that. Don't doubt me on that. She'll do it tomorrow if she thinks that the position of the British monarchy is in danger. Thomas Sheridan talks about the British addiction to the NHS. They also a lot of them have an addiction to the monarchy. It's a huge stumbling block for them. It's something they need to get over. They need to change their constitution in Britain. They need to get rid of devolution. That's actually not working. Whatever Nicola Sturgeon's Kool-Aid drinkers might tell you, there's a lot of people in Scotland who don't like devolution. There's a lot of people in Scotland who are very uneasy at the prospect of an independent Scotland because an independent Scotland would be a sectarian state. So we are in World War III. This war is not going to be fought like the First World War, the trenches of Flanders or whatever, or the Second World War, aerial bombing over London and aerial bombing over Central and Western Europe. This is a different war. This is a more insidious one. Because there are the people like that foolish woman I was talking to today who believe, or who are still clinging to the cultic notion that the government is on their side. So this war, World War III, it's what George Orwell described in 1984. The previous wars were different states against different states. This war is the government against the people. That's the war we have now. They're at war with us. Our government is our enemy. But I knew that from 2012. I saw this coming. Pardon me for saying it, for being boastful, but I did see this coming. The government is our enemy. and they view us as their enemy. It wasn't always that way. I can assure you of that, it wasn't always that way. That's what's happened in the US, that's what's happened in Britain. So we're not alone here. Remember that, we're not alone. But it is a global war in which the globalists, through national governments, that is the national government of the United States, the UK, the Republic of Ireland, Australia, and so on, they are using those as proxies to declare war on the populace. That's the Third World War, and we are in it. Because we saw that yesterday. If we hadn't seen that before yesterday, we saw it yesterday. This is a war. This is a major conflict. Where do we see it? On the ground. We're not allowed to travel 5 kilometres beyond our home. All of our local indigenous businesses have been shut down on us. They're trying to get us to wear masks, which is a Chinese thing. That's coming, I think, from China. The Chinese people have been wearing masks for years, ostensibly to deal with the pollution. Yeah, actually, China is highly polluted, in fairness. I don't think if you were in Beijing, you'd be particularly condemned for wearing a mask. But I think to wear a mask maybe on the beach in Portmarnock might be a little bit of an exaggeration.